Hey everyone, my name is Renee for Get Motivated, and I'm so excited to be here with you guys today on this conversation of the exploratory. It's actually an extended graduate check-in call with practice manager Rose. I will have check-in calls with our students of the CVBP program, or the Veterinary Burnout Prep Certification Program. And in this particular conversation, we shared a lot, and she was so open with her experience, her journey throughout the program, her experience with burnout and other things as a human. So I'm really excited to sort of make this a podcast because there's so much that does need to be said, and so many conversations that can help other people feel not alone, but in fact connected, as well as getting the conversation started as individuals and organizations. So in this conversation, it is very real, it's very raw. There are vocabularies. I love vocabulary, and some of the things, this is why our call went so long, is that some of the things that she would share throughout her milestones in the program stood out to me. And so we talk about some of the vocabulary words that she uses in the context of well-being that I use. And I want more people to become familiar with how to properly use these words in the context of well-being so that they can have more conversations in their real life and their work. But we also talk about a lot of other things, like the self-pressure that comes as a high performer, how your self-worth can be tied into things. And so there's a cycle that happens when things aren't going the way that you want them to go, but you work harder and then you crash. And then the cycle continues, right? You put more self-worth into that thing. Things aren't going the way that you want them to go. You work harder and then you crash. And so how to break free of that cycle, how to recognize, what's happening internally, and then to get some distance from it, even if you are in a state of burnout, to not just gain awareness around the bigger picture, but to be able to process what it's really about, why it's really happening. We discuss when big things in your life go up in smoke. If you've ever experienced something like that, where you've put a lot of resources, time, energy, money, whatever the thing is, into something and it just ends. And what our relationship is like that, what our relationship to that thing is, and how CVBP can actually help metabolize some of the feelings that you are experiencing. We talk about some of the coping mechanisms and how burnout is in fact different for everyone. So I discuss that more in CVBP 2. That's level 2 of the CVBP program. But, these are things that we need to start recognizing and honoring within our industry for people so that we can begin to work with it or manage it, navigate it together for the ultimate, mission, which is to reach shared success. So lastly, one of the really big topics we, cover is teaching generations the skills they need to be part of the workforce. Thought leader and author Simon Sinek, he in his work is in leadership. He shares that same sentiment. And so for Rose to express that here, again, this is why some of the things she's talked about has stood out to me, because this is the way, when we look at the future, when we start to embrace these things, those are the ways that are going to make everyone's life easier, more efficient, more effective, more connected, and how we can start asking the different types of questions in order to not just ease our experience, right? Not just to raise our quality of life or work, but also to, you know, help people along in that journey. So if you are in the veterinary industry, regardless of your role, but especially if you're a practice manager, you're going to relate to this call. As people, this is the last thing I'll say before jumping into it. She explores an experience that I know in my heart to be true for many individuals, again, regardless of your role, but as people, as individuals, but then as that the other side of that spectrum is if you are in a place of leadership, you know, these paradigms that we the duality that we experience, what our responsibility is as an organizational leader, but then also what our experience is as an individual and how we can navigate the road ahead and how we can advocate for ourselves. And, you know, recognizing when you are potentially in a unhealthy relationship, sort of a toxic relationship with your practice, and, you know, trying to understand that you are not alone in that experience. Okay. Many other people are feeling that same challenge. You're not sure what to do. And there's a lot of things that you can do in order to make the situation better. And then there are times where it may be time to walk away, but it's neither one is easy, and it's not supposed to be easy. And we would be kidding ourselves and maybe feeling a lot of shame or guilt if we tell ourselves that it's supposed to be easy, but I'm the only one struggling with this. Does that make sense, everyone? So let's get into it. Without further ado, Miss Rose, fantastic conversation. I'm really excited to bring it to you guys. I want to hear from you in the comments, in the communities of GMU. Let us know what you think.
Let's talk about your journey a little bit. And, you know, there's so many things that have stood out to me with the things that you shared. And they're like, you had some pretty big breakthroughs. I don't know how much of a chance, even in your role as a practice manager, you get to hear people's journeys and their struggles. But tell me a little bit about what life was like for you before getting into the Vet Burnout Prep certification program.
Yeah, so the timing was actually very strange because I was working, I came up through, like, I was an assistant, and then I worked into technician, and then, you know, I went and got my CBT and I did all the things. And then my goal was always kind of to get into practice management because I was a manager before that. And I like the challenges of management. So I actually really do I enjoy people. I enjoy problem solving and all those things. Part of it is, you know, like I like to do something different all the time. And I was kind of getting to the point where I was really busy, but I'm also, and I'm sure, I know that I've obviously seen some of your videos. I'm a people pleaser to like kind of the nth degree. So I think that when I was in the role, it's not so much about doing work for me. I know Dr. Hawley talks a lot about, like, he was talking about like stacking and things like that, and about like, you know, reading books and things, you know, all those things. I've been doing that since I was like, I don't know, born. I just always have this, like, I always want to know more, like I always want to do more, I always want to be better. So that part of me, that was already kind of like developed. The part that I think was causing the burnout for me was more from a standpoint of, I am so I put too much pressure on myself to be everything to everyone all the time. And I'm not I've been with the same man for 18 years. I'm not technically married, but I've been with him for a long time. And I have a stepson, but I never had kids. So I really put all of my self-worth, that's the word I'm looking for, self-worth into my work. And so when things aren't exactly going like I want them to, or like how I feel they should, then I start working harder, thinking like that's going to make it better. So it's just this vicious cycle where I would like go, and then crash, go, crash. Like it's just always over. And every time I would read a book, I'd think, okay, well, now I'll read this book and I'll see like maybe they have some ideas in here of how I can improve myself and how I can stop this like vicious cycle. But what happens is I think that people that I was working with, and I don't think this is on purpose because I tend to really believe that most people are not like, they don't have malintent. Like nobody's out there to, and I don't want to say nobody, but 99% of the people aren't out there to say to you like, oh, I'm going to use and abuse you until whatever. It's just that I allowed that. And I felt like everything was my problem, like the weight of the world, like making sure the pets were well taken care of, making sure the clients were happy, making sure the staff was happy, making sure my doctors were happy. Like all of that was my responsibility. So that was just a lot to put, I think, on myself. And I think that's really where it started. So the burnout for me was not so much about the actual work or about the problems or about the things. It was more like I was internally at war with myself. Kind of like, you could do better, you could be better, but I'm tired, but I feel like I'm putting everything into it. And then like a little bit of victim mentality in that, that comes through.
Totally. And I, like you said, if I'm sure I've talked about my relationship and like having Braden before I had Gavin and stuff. And so I hear you on that, and I relate to that. But I think a lot of people, even if they don't have the same familial structure that we have, that the mentality of I can just work harder and that'll make things better. I think some of that is more of personality, and some of it's, that nurture part of how we were maybe raised.
Yes, it's definitely that. No, I don't blame my parents for any of that because that's how they were raised.
Right.
But that was definitely like, I say to people, like I was, I don't want to put like religion into it, but I was born very strict Catholic, work hard, blue collar upbringing. So it's like, the harder you work, the more successful you're going to be. And like, if you're not suffering, and basically I was taught from a young age that if you're not suffering, that you are not good. So, and I didn't realize that until I honestly was talking to like my therapist, and that kind of like came up, and she really doesn't believe in like, and I believe this too, that, like blame, like putting blame on your past, like you have to move past that. But it was nice to understand that like, oh, I have this thing, and bring it to the front of my head. So I recognize like, you don't have to always be the one to suffer to be a good person. Like you can still be a good person and set some boundaries.
Yeah.
But that's been something very hard for me to work through, honestly, because that was very deeply ingrained.
And that's where, like, I think as vet professionals, we share somewhat of the same archetypes that get us into this line of work. Mm-hmm. And so that's where but the theory is there before Get Motivated existed. And then once Get Motivated existed, it was like, now these conversations are coming forward, and more research is being done in this, around this content, even outside of vet med, that now we have scientific backup that all of us scientists want, to correlate that. But for us as individuals, it does help you at least understand it. And that's where, like you said, if you can get it out in front, then we can manage it. So tell me, that was one thing that stood out. You had mentioned that you felt like, your self-work being largely defined by your career is what was leading your burnout, moving through that, what about the program helped you to, and I'm sure it's a process, like it's not like we're like, oh, we are, our self-worth is like 100% now, we're good. But like turning that ship a little bit, is there anything that stood out to you that you're like, yes, this is the tool that I need in my tool belt? These are the levers that I want to pull for the system that works for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started this program, like I signed up for the program while I was still working for my previous practice. And then I was probably about like a week in, and starting out and answering a lot of the questions, like a lot of the homework, honestly, that you gave me. I think like answering some of those questions, like definitely like quality of life stuff, where I was like making excuses in my head for like certain people. So it's not that it made them bad people, like what happened with that particular instance, that made me realize like I thought that this was just about the burnout, but there was so much more to it, to be honest with you. There was that the burnout, like I think a lot of times like I felt like the burnout was external. So I was like making it all external, and it's a bit of both. Like it was definitely, there was external factors and there were internal factors as well. And I think that kind of brought to light like a lot of the things that we went through. Like it kind of brought to like, okay, well, there's definitely like external things that were contributing. And the thing is like, can I change those things? And the answer ended up being, no, I can't change those things. What can I change within myself? I remember that was that exercise. What things can I change within myself? Like those are things I can control. So it turns out that right when that happened, my practice owners did something to me that I was just like, whoa, like that is way out of line. And I think before I had started that, I kind of would have probably stuck with it and made an excuse, but for that behavior, because I had been making excuses for the behavior, I didn't want to be a quitter. And a lot of that was like my pride, of saying like, I invested in this thing. I've done so much work for this thing. I basically started this thing from the ground. There's all that pride in there. And in that moment, like of doing some of those exercises, I remember thinking like a lot of this is ego. Like I have too much ego right now. So I just kind of was like, and I'm still, honestly, there's things I'm still working with like that. So for instance, being in that program, that actually helped me realize that those external factors I could not control, that I needed to like let this whole thing go. Like a lot of this was just me ego hanging on to this job. But it was really, really unhealthy. And I think that had it just been a few things of me just like internally working on my burnout, working on the things that made me made that were contributing to just like some burnout, that I probably could have worked through that. But starting in the course, I realized that I was like, these external factors are affecting me so much. It really helped in just like working through those feelings and saying like, what do I want? And the one of the really greatest things that you guys did was, it was like, what do you want? Like, what do you want for yourself? I remember there was an exercise in there where you're like, it was like to list all the things, like, what do you want? And I was just like, all right, well, I'm just gonna go like crazy, even if it sounds like, even if it's not practical, because sometimes a little too practical.
Wow, that's a lot. And I thank you for being so open and sharing that with us, with me. It's a couple things jump out at me. Is one, and this one's a quick question. When you talk about the recognition that it's ego, was that in your vocabulary before CVBP?
Yeah, it was, but it wasn't something that I actually like I've heard of it, and I'm not a religious person, but I am like spiritual. So I think that kind of was, part of that probably comes from New Earth. I was reading New Earth for a little bit, but that was like actually during the time. But I was trying to actually, when it was happening, I kept saying like, this is just me being stubborn. I was trying to think of a word for it. And then like part of it came, I know what the ego is. So, ego obviously rules like emotions and it helps you keep yourself safe. So that's where I was like, okay, well, it's got to be the ego. So yeah, a little bit, but not like, I wasn't like really like into it. After this whole thing, I did start looking into it a little bit more and being like, okay, that's definitely what I'm feeling.
Just the way that you use it in conversation, like that is the way that I think people who are on this journey use it. And it's such to be able to not just use the term, but to have the experience with it. It's like not every day that you get to meet people who do that. But I think that through more people doing that, we will see that be like an everyday thing where people get it and they understand it versus like, what do you mean? Like ego, ego, right? Like they might think something different. So I like that it's like how saving that can be for you to just go, oh, well then I'm going to pick you up and put you over here because I see what you're doing. Stop touching the buttons, like
stop touching the buttons. Exactly. Yeah. I think I always thought of egotistical. I always thought of like, if I use that term, I'd always think of somebody who's like full of themselves. Like, oh, that person is full of themselves. But like, that was kind of a flip on the vocabulary. Like I just learned that like what that word actually means and just saying like, hey, it doesn't mean you don't have to go to somebody who's like full of ego that having ego is not a bad thing. You need ego. But when you put that at the forefront, that's where it gets a little bit like, is this really me? Or is this just me, wanting to look better or do something? Essentially, that's for other people. To me, is like ego is like for other people. It's not really for myself.
But I think when
other than the protection
are in that spot where you were, which is like whether it is your role or whether it is how long you've been with a clinic, like or whether it is how much self-worth we're putting into it's like we've not, like you don't think you're more important than what you are, but sometime in some way you kind of do. We sort of over exaggerate that way because we would like to think that we are. And even in a really healthy relationship, like you are important and you're valued, but at the same time, like there is this impermanence to it and or some level of replaceability. And then you have, the other end of the spectrum where like you work at a clinic and it's very obvious that you are replaceable. I don't want to work there and I don't want to be here. Like it's kind of, again, like spectrum work. But there's so many people who we invest so much into our work as vet professionals, no matter what your role is. And so especially over 10 plus years, if you are the kind of person who is going to give it your all and more than just your all, I think that can be a thing where we stay in positions longer than what they're serving us. And that's where like when you had said something kind of to that effect of we have a choice is yes, you've put so much into this, whether it's that thing or whether it's into the clinic. And that can sometimes, it's like the chains that we put upon ourselves. We want to feel needed as caregivers. So we almost do more and more and more, not even, like to our point earlier, like working harder, but like we just want people to need us, but then it becomes no longer fulfilling and it starts to degrade us. All of that keeps us bogged down by some of that stuff. Where do you feel like you'd be if you had never come across CDBP? Like emotionally, maybe.
I honestly feel emotionally that it really helped me process a lot. Like, honestly, like, I don't want to get emotional now, but this has been like, it was almost like, and I don't want to make other people's, because there are people who've been through serious trauma, and like I don't want to like put that in like a thing, but this has been kind of like traumatic for me in a way that like I viewed those people, and it's almost like being in a relationship like with somebody and it being like mentally or even physically abusive, and like I understand where people are coming from with that, because I look at this as a, like objectively as saying like, hey, these people aren't bad people. I don't hate them, regardless of what's happened with everything. I have to look at it in a way like this was a way for me to do what I needed to do for myself. And I truly believe that, like, had this not happened this way, I probably would still be dealing with that. And I didn't learn those coping mechanisms. So it's easy for someone to say to you, like, hey, why do you let them do that? Or why do you just don't do that? Or just don't talk to them? Or like, just tell them to stop. But like, if you're not used to that, or like you don't understand that, or deep down you feel like you're going to be rejected, it's really hard to do that. It sounds simple, but it's not. Like, it's really not. And so I think if I hadn't come across this program, I don't think that I would have been able to, I think I might have processed it, but it would have taken a lot longer, because I almost don't think that I realized what my like burnout was about until I started asking those questions. Like deep down, I probably would have said, oh, I'm just doing too much, or like they're asking me to do too much and they're not really giving me a choice to, which isn't true, but like, that kind of thing. But I do think that like that kind of brought up like the questions deep down that I honestly wouldn't have thought of, to say like, hey, maybe this is a little bit more than just like you're doing too many things. Maybe this is an unhealthy relationship. Maybe you love these people, but you don't need to necessarily be with them, right? Like, you need to let this go, the whole ego thing. I don't think I would have came across this as quickly, or I don't even know if at all, to be honest with you. So I'm very grateful for everything you guys did and have taught and all those things. I think it's really necessary in the vet med community, because so many people are burning out and it's not taken seriously at all. And I think that's just because the industry's always been like this. We're always working understaffed. We're always expecting people to work more and work harder, and like that shouldn't be how it is, not just in this industry, but any industry. So it's really good that it's being brought to light. That's what originally made me like decide. And I was thinking like, well, too, like a lot of my staff is burned out and they're coming in with problems. And that was kind of always on the front of my head too. Like, they're coming in with a lot of problems, and it makes me sad. Like the things that they're going through, like I honestly didn't have to go through, like housing, like a lot of them can't afford to live. They're living with their parents still, in their mid to late 20s. And, there's just so many things they're going through. And for me, it kind of felt like burnout's different for everybody. Like sometimes I think it all gets lumped into one specific thing. Like, this is what causes burnout. But like, you can't say that. It's really individual for each person, I believe. I mean, I don't know. I'm not the expert, you guys are, but like, and for me, it was just kind of like, I wanted to find a better way to identify with them. And that also is what brought me to the program too, originally.
Do you feel more equipped to help people navigate and prevent it or recover from it if it's something that or do you feel it?
I have a better understanding for sure. I think this is more just me like being like, could you really like, if somebody came and asked me, wondering if I actually would make any kind of a difference. But I think given the tools, like, yes, I could definitely point some things out or help people for sure. But I being as somebody, I think it's just more in my head. I'm like, okay, well, I keep struggling with it and I'm still having struggles. So it's kind of like that imposter syndrome of like being like, could you? But honestly, like when we were talking, like this is something I really feel very passionate about, and I do want to help others with. in some capacity. I don't know how, but in some capacity. So yeah, I'd hope so.
Yeah. And that's cool. I mean, in CVBP 2, we've heard so much from CVBP 1 of people like, you know, when we designed the program, it was for the individual. But throughout the past year and a half or so many people said coming into the program, like, I want to help others. But we know that, yes, while that is true, it also might be a little bit of a mask that many professionals wear, which is to say, yep. I'm here to advocate for someone other than myself. And that does make us feel, again, like good. And that's great. And that's where I think that there is some truth to it. But what we too know is that we can't have other people's breakthroughs for them. And so, but at the same time, being able to give enough, like, give certain training tools to the people who are either in a position or who are just that person that someone would go to and talk to, like just simple things that can be shared with people. While, and you kind of talked about it, and one of I think maybe your final project actually, which was like and we're going to toggle a little bit. So you talked about in your project, like how it might look different for teams or like leadership within teams to not get wrapped up in certain things. And when that would better retention when they're more aligned, or like updating core values and like vision and mission to where people can feel like they either have a choice or they can align themselves to that and contribute to the mission in a more transparent way. And so I want to talk about that a little bit, where it's like, like you said, if we're coming into, from where it used to be, the industry, to where we want to take it, recognizing that there are lots of people who are in that, and we're going to say this like gently, in that unhealthy relationship with their place of work. And they're not aligning. And so like what we want for, I think the overall is that if we can mitigate burnout, then we can increase retention, so long as, and maybe we're like developing the formula in real time here, but so long as they are in alignment with a company's values, or that they are a part of what that shared vision and mission is. And so that's where like we've taken that into account for CVBP 2. So there is more structure on like sharing with teams and things of that nature. But what's your take, the individual who's not aligned? And it's and I'm so happy. And in this sense, it's like it came out of a place of not okay, and it happened in such a way that it left you feeling, I believe rightfully, like, yes, again, like there are certain types of trauma, but how everything unfolded and the abruptness of it all and all of the different things that go into a quick exit of a 10-year career and relationship and security financially and all that things and all of the work, like not aligned with where I'm at as an individual and what our responsibility is as an organization to help people, and how it kind of changed your mindset and approach to being a leader. You know what I'm saying? Because those are two ends of the spectrum, right? When we're talking retention and teams, individual who leaves, whether it's by whatever. So not retention, right? We quit or
Yeah.
we're fired
Yeah.
or whatever. Makes
Yeah,
sense.
I think that I think part of what you said, like, kind of hit the nail on the head for me. So like when I first started in management, a lot of it was like, I had this, like, I got into management because I really, okay, I know, I'm sure you can understand this, but not all people can understand it. If there's something inside of you where you feel like you're bigger, like you can do more, but you're also like, there's still imposter syndrome, but you're still like, I think I'm meant for more. Like, I think I'm meant to do more. Like, I'm meant to be something. I just don't know what that something is. And so a lot of that is like, when I first got in, was kind of like thrusting all of my knowledge, like being like, I know how to do this. And like, there's people out there who don't necessarily aren't ready, like they're not in the part of their journey yet where like your information is going to be helpful to them. It's actually going to sound more like you're just being a know-it-all, which is kind of where that was. But for me, so a lot of that was kind of like learning over like a decade, kind of how to like step back and realize like this person, like we're not seeing eye to, or like are like, we're not aligning at this moment of like what is the expectation is, and then kind of like discussing it with them, but not talking at them, like talking with them. Do you know if you know what I'm saying? So I guess I'm saying that because I'm leading to the point of like, well, the staff, a lot, the whole aligning thing is, one, if you don't talk to them and you don't explain what the expectations are, they can't know if they're aligning with those or not. And that leaves them in a place of like turning their wheels. So it's like burnout because they're like, I'm trying this, I'm trying that, I'm trying this, but we're really not getting anywhere because I have an expectation as a leader in my head, and they have they have a thought of like what they think my expectation is, but I did not verbalize it. And so like, we're never gonna get there. And also just not like waiting for someone, putting it out there, knowing what the expectations are. But I think a problem is a lot of the veterinary hospitals, even these ones that are in corporate, don't state what their vision is, like, and commit to it. Even if they do, it's something that's on like a back page somewhere, like on a wall that nobody looks at. And that, it sounds stupid. And I've been told to my face that those are stupid, that the vision and mission statements are stupid. And yeah, they're dumb if you don't do anything with them. But if you say to the staff, like, these are our mission, this is our vision, our vision is, care for, all pets, and, like, exactly. And then every day saying like, that doesn't align with what our mission and our vision are, or that does align with what our mission and our vision are. And then when it comes time for them to come with you and say problems and things like that, kind of letting them figure those things out on their own too, as well. Like, not, giving them, like, they come to you with a problem, and like part of me just wants to like solve a problem for them, done, because I'm busy and I have things to do. But then saying like, hey, we got to take a second to work through this. And I also do not, part of the problem is a disconnect, I think, with this younger generation, is that we assume that they were taught the way that we were taught. And that happened to me. I was like, I don't know what is going on, but like, they're all like complaining about their pay and their stuff and like whatever. And I was like, I'm like, but they don't want to work, So like, we're all saying that right now, but that's not actually true. Because if you talk to them, a lot of that is just that they weren't taught that, okay, if I want to raise, there's like a process for that, where you say, hey, I have to go to my supervisor and say to them, in a professional manner, not at them, because I've definitely had the ones that have come at me and have started like yelling at me. I'm just like, that's not how we ask for raises. Like, but instead of getting mad at them, it's part of saying like, okay, I need to actually teach them. And so part of us being a leader in this generation is just teaching that younger generation the things that they never, eye contact, they don't know how to do it. They were raised on cell phones and screen time and things like that. And I was lucky that I was just on the cusp of that. So I don't get that. And that's really not fair to them, that we just automatically assume that they're disrespectful because they can't make eye contact with us. They just were never taught how to. So it stinks because there's this added extra responsibility on us, but at the same time, like, we can't blame a whole generation of people because they have standards, and they're coming in and saying, like, doing things that we never did, whereas like the reason that I'm so burned out is because I was taught you keep going. I was taught no matter what, you push through it. I was taught my body does not matter because I'm going to sleep when I'm dead and it doesn't matter right now. I treated my body like crap my whole life. I pushed it. I had back problems, neck issues, name it. I was taught that my emotions the way that I thought didn't matter. Those are things you kept to yourself. You didn't tell other people about them. There's a whole evolvement coming now, like a whole evolvement of like this, like honestly, a whole species is evolving. And I think we just need to like recognize like them coming to us and saying, hey, I'm not going to work every weekend. They shouldn't say it like that. So that's where you go to them like, hey, that's not how we asked. But at the same time saying like, okay, well, I'm not mad at them because they're saying they're putting boundaries. Like, I just didn't have any boundaries. And I still get ticked off. I'm not going to lie. I still get ticked off when they come to me and they're like, I want this. And I'm just like, oh, but then at the same time, I have to say like, but that's just the way it should be. They shouldn't have to be working 50, 60 hours a week. They should have a weekend off with their family. Like, those things should be happening. How can we do that instead? You know, I think I went off on a tangent there. I'm sorry, but
I hear you. And like, I agree with a lot of that. And it's great. I can't wait for you to get into CVBP too, because you'll see exactly like where some of that stuff comes together as a whole. Us again seeing where like the ego comes into play, like for people who are untrained or are unwilling or are like they're just so wrapped up in their own stuff, go about it the same way that I went about it. You know, this is how like, but that's where I think personally the pandemic had catapulted the industry forward. Yes. In a lot of different ways. But since then, since we are now 3.5 years out, 3 years out, that people had the opportunity at some point to either keep on the way of COVID, of like, I'm going to use certain technology that I didn't use prior, or I'm going to change, you know, our hours, like whatever the thing is, or I'm going to go back to it, right? Which is like, okay, I'm going to no longer have a virtual, you know, a VA like to roll the phones over to. We're going to go back to the hours or whatever. And I know for a lot of companies or like practices, it's been a really hard thing. Like, they want to see all of the pets, but that obviously isn't physically possible. That's like a parenting technique. It's almost like a coaching technique though too, which is to say like, this isn't how you do the thing. And you're right in having your emotion and allowing yourself to have that emotion of being ticked off, while also like, you know, gently like guiding them where it needs to be. Because that's the other thing is that because we've changed the way people work and how they get work, you can't apprentice in the same way.
Yes.
Because the kennel role either A, doesn't exist in a lot of places. I was at one clinic who, when I was hired on, they had that role. They weren't like, we didn't have boarding, but the role was there. It was like pet care associate or something. I don't know. Like whatever. Right. But I'm not a huge one for terms. Not that the terms don't matter, but you get what I'm saying. Like, the kennel role was there. And then the kennel role went away. Lucky for us and her was that we trained her into a VA, but now that entry point is not there anymore. And we're saying like, VA isn't an entry level. Like, where do people enter and get trained on how to act within a organization? And also like, even those who do have that ability, there's still a like our son, my bonus son, his biological son, like he gets to go into work and see certain things, but he doesn't respond in the same way that like we do. But I think that's because he has a different personality type. And and that's hard for us, even as parents who were, whether it was from the way that we were raised or whether it was for whatever was intrinsically there before we hit adversity and we felt like we had to get out of it. Like he just doesn't have that same level of operating or thinking. And maybe it'll come, maybe it won't. We don't know, but it's still like we have to still work with it. So like I get it, I get it. And I love that you can pull all these things in together. And I'm sure that will translate to who you're working with now and be able to, like, you'll be able to build relationships with people in a different way because you think outside the box. And I feel like that's just the thing. Like, even, like you said earlier, people who are in leadership roles aren't always, like, they don't have formal leadership training. And,
it's a problem in this industry. Like, even just like, I feel bad because lucky for me, I actually received leadership training in hospitality before I went over. But had I not had that, I don't think that I would have like been able to like handle anything. But I just feel lucky that I actually got that training before I went into vet med. Being a manager or being in leadership is so hard. It's so hard. And I, like, I think because every single problem that comes to light, like, it's my fault, no matter what. And deep down inside, like, I know too, because it is like, I don't know if it's all technically my fault. There's definitely things that, like, come from the top down, but, and I can't control those, but like, whatever it is, I have to fix it. And so a lot of it is too, like, I think that these leaders are getting completely burnt out because I don't know if you've like been on you're on LinkedIn, or like if you're noticing all this stuff, they're like, managers need to be better, managers need to be this, managers need to be that, managers. And it's just like, it's almost like I feel like I'm being berated constantly as a leader, that instead of someone like saying to you like, hey, we got your back, here's some things we can change, instead of just coming from this point of like looking at everybody saying, hey, my boss sucks, my boss sucks, my boss sucks. And it's just like, that's really tough. And like, at that point, being a leader, I see so many, because I'm in like a Facebook page too. And it just like occurs to me because I'm in there, and I just see people constantly going like, I need to quit. Like, I can't do this anymore. This is just like my heart hurts. Like, nobody ever listens to me. Like, either this is going on, that's going on. And, I think that's really sad in this industry too, because there is no formal training to just be able to take on the day to day. Like, I don't know how you take on all that additional emotional responsibility as well as a leader. So, and that's just like, that's a formula for burnout. I don't know one practice manager who's not burned out, like, to be honest with you. I think everybody is kind of like, and especially with all the changes that are going on in the world right now, and the world's constantly changing and evolving. So I think we always have to be at that. But I really feel like right now, I think that there's just been, with COVID happening, I think everything kind of got really out of control really fast. And these people, that trickles down too, because it's the leaders, but then also the staff is dealing with, like, even me as a leader, I'm not going to claim to be perfect. Honestly, I was getting my butt kicked so often that it was starting to trickle down to staff too, because I'm just like, I don't know what else to do. Like, I want to sit here and I want to do one-on-ones with all my staff, but like, I have a thousand other things going on, and my practice owners are like constantly berating me, and like, my staff hates me because they think that I made decisions that I didn't make. And then like, there's just all this stuff going around. And I really hope that we can change that. And I think this program would definitely help with that too, as well, because it's so rampant right now. It's kind of sad, but also there's hope. So
yes, 100%. There's it's a tough spot to be in, and I'm so glad that more people are investing in themselves and having that, or investing in their teams, and bringing these conversations to light and like sharing their experiences. Not only in the program did you come far, but like just in life, like you said, you were raised
Yeah,
really, you've come a really far way, and like we're still on this journey, so I
always.
don't know where it will go for you. But this has been fantastic, and I really appreciate you taking the time out to talk
Oh,
about these.
thank you.
It means so much to us to be like, even Doc, but he didn't have the same level of face-to-face with some of our graduates as I did. And so he was like fangirling too, or fanboying,
So
you know,
funny.
because
Awesome.
I saw them on YouTube, and it's funny because like people will say the same thing to us, but to him he was like, oh my gosh, it's Rose, or whatever. So I mean, it just means the world to us. And like I said, we work in like as much as we can to make the program better and make it more accessible and make sure that it's achievable and it's attainable. Oh, let me ask you this before we go. Tips. Do you have tips? You had mentioned like you liked the GTD and that you had some sort of software that you could use to sort of make a digitized GTD where you were managing projects. But besides like favorite practical things that you use now, tips for other people, like if they were going through the program,
maybe 5 months or something like that. I can't remember exactly, but
but you stayed motivated throughout it, and you completed it. I mean, admittedly, we've had some people who have asked for extensions, or who have not been able to complete it in that year. So yeah, how did you, because as a busy practice manager, I was going to say what felt like probably shit hitting the fan, but how did you, over the 5 months or so, how did you stay motivated to complete the program?
honestly, I feel like it was because I was going through so much, and I like honestly needed to process a lot of those like things I was going through. I think that really helped keep me motivated to do it. But I really think that what you guys are doing is like so needed. I mean, so needed. I just can't believe there's not more talk about it. Like I've seen a lot of hype lately about mentorship programs, which are great. Like honestly, I feel like there should, I keep looking and going, why isn't there one for like leader? Like, why isn't there one for practice managers? Like, like, where is that one? It's like for doctors and technicians. Where's the practice manager one? We need it the most. But but I think this is like core. So to me, this is like very core of like, if you want to build a practice that, is not turning over people, because so many are turning over and so understaffed. This is the core of like where all that is coming from, because a lot of people are like, it's money, it's money, it's money, but it's not just money. It might be a little bit money, but it's not just money. And I think we've made a lot of strides towards financially, like making this a better place for them to work. But this is definitely core. Is just making sure that people are taken care of and they're taking care of themselves. And yeah, like, so really for me, the whole processing part was probably motivation, but motivating as well as like really just that I wanted to be able to help others. And in realizing that, I kind of ended up just like helping myself. So that's kind of where I was like, this is perfect, because like I did it so that I could help my staff, but I actually really needed this more than they did, I think, at this point, because it's got to start with me first before I can move on to like helping them. So that's really why.
I love it. It makes total sense. Learning by contrast, which is to say,
contrast, yes,
where I don't want to be and I want to be somewhere else. And that contrast is what puts me back on where I need to go.
Yeah.
And so
contrast is necessary. You always have to have contrast. Yeah. After all this, right after I finished all this, I actually started down that path, and it's been very like eye-opening and helping me just like understand like a little bit more about like my thought processes, and so that like that was actually the catalyst. Like that started me on a whole other journey, which we like again we probably talk about that for like a whole other time, but because I just left the situation, which I wouldn't recommend to everybody. Like I think there's a lot of things you could do without leaving a situation, but for me, that just made the most sense.
Yeah. 100%. Well, I appreciate that. But I'm glad that those physiological symptoms have fallen away, now that you're like out of the forest a little bit. So I know how, now that we're like, I know how traumatizing it is to like walk away from a thing, but, or get fired from a thing. It is kind of like, it is trauma, but, sometimes it can be the best thing for you. And it, it might be scary and all the things, but I do hope that it's the, like, I believe like firmly that it is the best thing for you, that I'm so proud of you to stand up for yourself and have that sense of empowerment to advocate for yourself, and then do right by the logistics of like, okay, I need my job, but then do the life work that will get you aligned with where you need to be now, and then like continue like using those tools to keep that momentum building